welcome to another episode of Code Blue, a weekly podcast dedicated to all things unexplained and unidentified. Brought to you by Bluebook.tv. Please check it out. It's free. I am Thor, and thank you for listening. The topic of this episode: the brightest minds are on it. To write about the accomplishments in research into unexplained phenomena to this date means writing about the heroes that have made our current knowledge possible. And there have been bright minds on this topic since at least 1947, when Major Jesse Marcel first declared he encountered the debris of a crash-landed saucer before he was forced to pose with a weather balloon and declare he was mistaken to cover it up. Before that, US, British, and German airmen during World War II reported seeing Foo Fighters that followed them in flight, made circles around them before disappearing at lightning speeds. It was the aviator Kenneth Arnold who coined the term flying saucer when he reported on a first post-war sighting near Mount Rainier, Washington, and later was to be replaced by the term unidentified flying object, coined by Edward Ruppelt of Project Bluebook. The 50s saw a wave of sightings with a military response in the form of the Robertson Report in 1953 that recommended denying their existence while secretly continuing investigation. This is where the break occurred between civic knowledge, interest, and investigation on one hand, and military secretive knowledge and cover-up of the evidence and artifacts gathered on the other. It is interesting to note how many government officials tasked with investigating the phenomena later turned enthusiastic whistleblowers or publishers of facts. First, J. Allen Hynek, then Nick Pope, and more recently, Louis Elizondo. In the 60s, we saw the publishing of Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods, demonstrating alien influence on Earth's ancient history and archaeology, the pyramids, Stonehenge, and more. Von Däniken was later persecuted, ridiculed, disparaged, and even jailed in an attempt to silence him. Meanwhile, Zecharia Sitchin's book The 12th Planet was published in 1976, linking Sumerian mythology to evidence of ancient astronauts, the origins of man, the Garden of Eden, the Flood, and more. Despite both using exhaustive scholarly methods, field research, deep knowledge of language and archaeology, they were considered fringe, ridiculed, and marginalized as pseudo-scientists, which became an obstacle mantra for others to overcome as well. This was nothing new, though. Copernicus, as well as Magellan, both were ridiculed for their heliocentric as well as round Earth convictions. And so, humanity learns, seemingly more often than not, the hard way. So before we go down the list of the pioneering and leading researchers and heroes because they chose to endure, no matter how negative the consequences on their personal lives, well-being, or economy, the stigma, ridicule, disparagement, safety, and sometimes total sacrifice of self-family it would bring. Since the late 70s and early 80s, the amount of research, evidence, eyewitness, and experiencer accounts, as well as analyzed data, has increased exponentially. Organizations have sprung up worldwide, including the Mutual UFO Network. Conferences have been established for the sharing of new information and theories, and today, with technology and social media-driven self-publishing abilities, in a new century, the peer-to-peer ability to the sharing of information has not just liberated UFO research, but exponentially accelerated our collective knowledge. This, I believe, is the key to progress, as it will continue to accelerate knowledge and the numbers of those who know. The brightest minds today have spoken with clear voices while actively researching high strangeness, providing us with evidence, analytics, interviews with whistleblowers, and mind-blowing conclusions. Let's name them, and I hope to be thorough and ask for forgiveness for unintended exclusions. There are just so many, thankfully. Richard C. Hoagland at SidoniaEntertainment.com, whose research into the monuments of Mars and the Moon are pioneering and eye-opening exposures to alien presence in our solar system since before the dawn of time. Linda Moulton Howe at earthfiles.com, an Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist whose research on cattle mutilations, ancient bases in Antarctica, and pyramids in Alaska, to name just a fraction, are all on need-to-know intelligence files. Nick Pope at nickpope.net, who actually ran the British government's Ministry of Defence UFO intelligence research program for a long while. Whitley Strieber, an experiencer himself, who has written numerous books in fiction and non-fiction format that are must-reads and listens at his Dreamland podcast, unknowncountry.com. Graham Hancock's incredibly thorough and convincing research into ancient archaeology at grahamhancock.com. His discipline in argumentation and research is as thorough as they come and beyond dispute at this point. Colin Andrews at colinandrews.net, who was the first to systematically study and coin the term crop circle. Bud Hopkins, who led diagnosis, hypnosis, and support group organizations surrounding the alien abduction syndrome. Pulitzer Prize-winning author and Harvard professor of psychology, Dr. John E. Mack. David Paulides, with his Missing 401 series, has become authority on records of missing persons in U.S. national parks. Journalists like George Knapp at MysteryWire.com, the legendary Las Vegas native who first brought us the testimony of Bob Lazar, blowing the whistle on secret alien technology reverse engineering programs at Area 51, Groom Lake. Bob Lazar himself, of course, and his selfless courage to come forward, without any personal gain, and in fact, to a massive personal loss to his own intellectual curiosity, now locked outside of the phenomena, instead of being able to continue to study it up close from the inside. Jeremy Corbell, articulate publisher and recipient of UFO military footage. Luis Elizondo, former head of ATIP and the UAP task force, who to this day gets bombarded with disparagement by the Pentagon for his honest conclusions based on professional analysis. There are so many more required to be recognized. Below this podcast, we'll leave the list of many names and web links for your benefit, and I encourage you to do your own navigation to learn more. But other names include Stanton Friedman, Paula Harris, Grant Cameron, Jacques Vallée, Dr. Lynn Kitai, Richard Shaw, Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Childress, Kevin Burns, William Henry, Fabio Zerpa, John Burroughs, Bruce Maccabee, Gary Schwartz, Monsignor Corrado Bolducci of the Vatican Curia, Patty Greer, Paul Perry, Raymond Moody, Philip Corso, Timothy Good, Richard M. Dolan, Avi Loeb, Rizwan Virk, Alan Steinfeld, Eli Marzulli, Jaime Muzan, Dr. Stephen M. Greer, and the late Apollo astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and so many more. Worth mentioning politicians who have contributed in many ways include Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska, former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer, and President Jimmy Carter, an eyewitness himself. Countless podcasters as well have come forward to tackle the subject honestly, inviting an unbiased dialogue with intellectual curiosity, displaying evidence juxtaposed with a healthy debate and exchange of points of view, without ridicule. Journalists and hosts of the airwaves, starting with Art Bell, followed by George Norrie, Kevin Moore, Stephen Greenstreet, Rex Beer, Joe Rogan, and many, many more. We have a justice system that functions by handing out verdicts, often based on circumstantial evidence alone. In the absence of a smoking gun, you can establish guilt by evidence of eyewitness testimony, reconstruction of events, and other evidence left behind. Our court system, imperfect as it may be, continues to convict based on these logical parameters. Now, apply that to the unexplained phenomena, and you conclude the same. By the preponderance of circumstantial evidence, you can hand down verdicts of truths and facts by the same logic and evidentiary parameters. The reality of the unidentified is beyond reasonable doubt. It's a slam dunk verdict against humanity, guilty of ignoring the reality surrounding us. As evidence mounts, are we collectively by the numbers choosing to continue to not wake up? Perhaps not this time, due to volume of data, research, and access to information. This is the inflection point we're living, and I believe it is through the current method of multi-front research by a global army of researchers, supported and appreciated by a growing number of the public informed about such research, that we will at last pierce the veil of the illusion we now call reality. When we realize and recognize a new reality that normalizes the paranormal, be prepared. Strap yourselves in for the most important events ride in human history. You can watch or listen to this and other podcasts of the Code Blue series on Bluebook.tv. Please check it out. It's free. This has been Code Blue for all things unexplained and unidentified. Please subscribe, and each day, let's show some compassion and kindness. I am Thor, and thank you for listening. See you next time.